Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast, connecting the opaque world of food startups.
This is Daniel Imri Sitanayake of Tiny Farms, and you are listening to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode number 73. I hope you guys had a really good Thanksgiving, and if you're not in the US, I just hope things are going well in general. Now, today's episode is with Karen Kaplan of Frieda's. Now, Frieda's is a family business that you may not have heard of, but they have a pretty huge impact on specialty produce in the United States. They're most famous for introducing the kiwi, I'd say, in 1962, which was 92 years after the last fruit to be introduced, which was the banana in 1870. So that's pretty crazy right there if you think about it. And they've gone on to introduce 200 kinds of produce. By introduction, I mean more helping to make products from a very, very small niche and bring them into grocery stores and in food service. What can you guys learn from today's episode? Well, Karen, along with her sister, they took over the business from their mom, who's named Frieda, of course, in the late 80s, early 90s. And they've done a really, really good job, and they continue the success of Frieda. So I had to think about that. Why are they still around, and what are some of their strengths? Well, I'd say one strength is education. Introducing a new product and education, they go hand in hand, right? You have to educate the consumers. And I get, 2 to 3 emails per month from people asking for advice on how to introduce a new product, because it's really, really difficult. First, what is it? How do I use it? Why should I try it? All those types of questions have to be answered. And, they've done it time and time again. And they've developed their reputation now. People go to Frieda's looking for that specialty produce. So that's kind of helps them now and gives them an edge over, a startup company. But just listen to what you can learn from them on education. And you can also see it in the documentary called Fear No Fruit, which is available on Amazon, iTunes. And I think it's shown on United and a few other airlines. And it's kind of the basis for this call. Number 2 is their impact. We've talked about the different types of produce they've introduced, the kiwi, the mango, over 200 kinds, and you can see the list at the end of the documentary, which is very cool. But when I say impact, think of it this way. Specialty produce may not be a huge percentage of sales in a grocery store, but I think we can all agree that it has a big effect on your experience, how you shop, and how you judge a grocery store. You want to see cool and innovative and high quality produce when you enter in the store. If it's dilapidated and overripe produce, it's going to change your impression of that. So it really plays an important part in the grocery shopping experience, which is changing a little bit, from grocery to delivery, but still exists and is still the king, but it may change over the years. But the impact is undeniable of what they've done. So think about that and how you can learn from the impact that they made and some of their values, which goes into the management style. And I talked to Karen a little bit about it, but I saw them at a trade show 2 months ago, and they really, really have their ducks in a row. All the employees know where the other one is, interacting with them. They're just organized. I don't know. It seems like there's a clear responsibility from everyone. People know their roles and they work together well as a team, which you don't always see in a lot of mid to larger size companies. So, the company culture, how do they do it? Well, without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest. Okay. As the firstborn daughter of Frieda Kaplan, she began working with produce at the age of 10. After graduating with a degree in agricultural economics and business management from UC Davis, she joined Frieda's full-time. Working in just about every department of the company, she got promoted, and at the age of 30, she was promoted to president and CEO of the company. Along with her sister, they've taken over the company from their mom, or purchased it from their mom. And she is also the first female chairperson of the United Fresh Produce Association and one of the co-stars of the documentary Fear No Fruit. Karen Kaplan, how's it going?
It's going great, Matt. Just great.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And I guess I wanted to start out. Why did you guys decide to make the documentary?
Well, we didn't actually make the documentary. A friend of a friend is a filmmaker, and he heard the story of our family business. And my mom, is 92 years old, Frieda, and she's just a really charming individual with an amazing story. And he came to the office, and he kind of told us he was kind of excited about the story of the company and wanted to know if it would be okay with us if he pitched doing a documentary. And we had been thinking in the back of our heads that my mom's 92. At the time she was 90. We should start getting some of her stories on film. And I was thinking of hiring a filmmaker to just come in, and we were going to do kind of dry interviews. And so at first, Mark Bryan Smith is the name of the filmmaker. He said, yeah, we could do a 40-minute or under short documentary. So he shot footage he planned it for 2 months. They shot over 10 days. It was pretty amazing. And then he came to me one day and said, I want to show you something. And 40 minutes goes really fast in a documentary. And he showed me a 7-minute clip of something. And I looked at him. I said, I got it. You can't do it in 40 minutes, can you? And he said, I can't. He said, there's so much here. This is a full-length documentary. So then it became a 96-minute documentary. And what was so interesting, Matt, is when we started the process of getting everything ready, my mom did not yet know she was going to get an honorary PhD at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, a big university here in the United States in California. And when we found out she was going to get this honorary PhD, Mark said, I want to be there when she's there. I said, for what? He goes, I want to film it. I think it should be in the movie. I said, but in my mom's 90 years, this is like a blip. She's getting an honorary PhD. He said, just trust me. I'm like, okay. And he and a film crew came up, and they, as you saw in the movie, and filmed the whole thing. And of course, it's kind of the culmination of the whole movie, because you get her words of wisdom, the 2 minutes she had to change the lives of those students in the audience. So it's kind of an amazing experience. It's hard to believe it's been over a year. All the filming was done in June of 2014, and the film was actually released officially in March of 2015. So it's been quite an interesting process.
Great. And listeners, again, the documentary is called Fear No Fruit. And this episode, the Food Startups Podcast, you can find at foodstartupspodcast.com/Friedas. I'm going to spell it. It is Friedas. So Karen, I have my own takeaways, which I'll share with the listeners after the interview, but why do you think people would be interested in seeing this documentary?
Well, first of all, everybody has to eat. And it seems like more and more these days, people are really interested in where their food comes from. They want to hear the personal stories of the people that grow their food or market their food. And honestly, I can't think of a more exciting and touching story than the first woman in the world, probably the United States, to open a wholesale produce company back in 1962. I was just a little girl. And women just did not own their own businesses. They did not get up at midnight and go to work at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's the story of how she launched her business in 1962, how she's credited with introducing the kiwi fruit to America. It's hard to believe there was no kiwi fruit in America till my mom brought it in from New Zealand in 1962. And then we've had a hand in introducing almost 200 new and unusual fruits and vegetables to American consumers. Things like sugar snap peas, red seedless watermelon, purple potatoes, habanero chili peppers. It's kind of amazing. And it kind of grabs at your heart because it's a family story. So my sister and I, neither one of us planned to join the business, ended up joining the business. My eldest daughter, Alex, she ended up coming into the business after college. That wasn't planned. And we have, kind of a close-knit group here at the office, even though we're the only 4 family members that work here at the company. Everyone kind of feels like family. And you get a chance to see that in the movie. And then you get to go see some of our growers. And then if you overlay that over what's going on in California right now with the drought and with all the labor challenges, it's kind of fascinating. And literally, I don't think it's just me, 96 minutes goes by really fast. But I'll tell you, Matt, the confirmation of this is that the marketing firm that's marketing the film actually sold the film to United Airlines, Emirates, and Qatar Airlines. So we have been getting, and I'm not kidding, at least once a week, we get an email unsolicited from someone who's watched the documentary on United Airlines. And I don't know how they find our name. because it's not listed in United Airlines book. And they write to us and they tell us they'd never heard of Frieda's, but that story was so fascinating and so interesting. And it makes them want to look for our produce at the supermarket.
So I think you made a good point there, a couple, and that I think Frieda's is very, very well known when it comes to like B2B, people that are in the produce industry. But in terms of the final consumers, it's not quite as well known. So I think that's a really huge plus of the documentary, getting out to a broad audience of people that don't work in produce. Now, so it's interesting. You mentioned the drought. I guess I would like a little bit of an update because that was, in 2014, and they were talking about, well, listen, the drought in California, it was pretty bad in 2014. How was it this year in 2015?
Well, I'm not a weather expert, so I can't tell you all the specific details, but it's pretty dry around here. I know many of my farmer friends have pulled out crops that they're not going to grow. There's a lot of acreage that's lying fallow this year. And pretty much everyone says if we don't get some significant snowpack this year in California, that we're going to see a dramatic change in production in California next year. With that being said, Matt, I will tell you the produce industry is a very resilient industry. Farmers are very innovative and they can make lemonade from lemons. And so even though we may have a shortage of water, we have amazing technology available from us. A lot of it's used in Israel of ways of growing with less water or desalinating water or conserving water. So we're not going to stop growing food in California. It's just going to be done a little bit differently.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have no doubt about that. I was just reading a great book called The Rational Optimist, and it talks a lot about that and how advanced Israel is in agriculture. So yeah, California's just going to have to adjust. Regardless, I hope they get the required rainfall next year. Now, I guess I want to go back to another point, just because some people might overlook this, and this was from the documentary. So in 1870, the banana was introduced in the U.S. Then it took 92 years for the next fruit, which was previously known as the Chinese gooseberry, that Frieda helped market as the kiwi. So that's that's amazing that it took that many years for the next fruit to be introduced, I guess, on to a mass audience in the United States. Now, I guess, Karen, I'd like to go into something. So a lot of listeners to our show, they are trying to introduce a new product. And as you know, education is really difficult, especially when you don't have a huge platform, you don't have a lot of money to introduce there can be a great new root or tea or fruit, but on a limited budget, you guys have kind of built your guys' brand around that, right? Frieda's the place to find new and exotic fruits, and there's so many varieties still left to discover. But what advice would you give to someone that doesn't have the, let's say, clout that your company has in terms of educating, introducing a new superfood or food to the U.S.?
Well, there's so many more resources, Matt, available for people introducing new foods. I'm sure some of your listeners have heard of the Fancy Food Show that happens 2 or 3 times a year. In January, it happens in San Francisco. In July, it happens in New York. And I think there might be a third one in the fall. And that's where a lot of new products get introduced. It's a little bit expensive to go there, but if someone has a new food product, kind of a specialty food item, that's a great venue to introduce it. But I would say if I were someone that was, passionate about a product, I think I'd do my research first. I'd know who my competition is. I'd not only try the product out and sample it out to friends, I would sample it to people that are complete strangers that aren't going to say to me, "Oh, I love your product because I love you," right? You want someone to give you honest feedback. And then I would start small. I would not underestimate, I would overestimate my cost. My mom, we would always meet with farmers, and the farmer says, well, all I need is, it's going to cost me $10,000, and I can get it done in 2 weeks. And my mom says, you got to double your budget and triple the amount of time you think it's going to take to do something. So don't be overly optimistic when you're introducing a new product. It always costs a lot more. And in fact, if I was going to do a startup and start the business, I would try to make sure I have a ton of money socked away, like maybe 6 months' salary socked away. And if I could keep my regular job while I was introducing a new product, I would do that because I wouldn't bank on, having the next Chobani yogurt, right? But the other advantage is the internet and blogs and, everything to do with social media, because something can go viral very quickly if you connect to the right people. So, there's many techniques one could use.
Gotcha. Now, Karen, I'm pretty interested. You mentioned that you and your sister, originally, you were not going to go into the family business. What did you originally plan on doing, and why did you decide to come onto the family business after college?
Well, I went off to college like probably most students, and I was undeclared was my major. And I was kind of lost. I didn't really like where I was going to school, so I changed schools. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I was pre-law, I was pre-med. I mean, hard to believe, but back in the day, there weren't a lot of business programs. And I had worked every summer and every vacation for my mom, and it was just, to earn some extra money. So in my second year of college, one of my mom's key people was up in the San Francisco area where I was going to college, and he came and he took me to dinner, and he said, Karen, I'm not going to be working here forever, thinking of retiring, and I know your mom's going to be looking for someone to take over the business. You might want to think about considering Frieda's as your career. And then he left, and I, went back to my dorm and went to bed. And sometimes when we go to sleep, we have dreams and we process things. Literally, I must have processed that all night because I woke up in the middle of the night. I still to this day remember that, and had this epiphany that here I'm struggling to find what I love, right? I'm pre-med, I'm pre-law, I'm who knows what. And it's sitting there right in front of me. That was my passion. I love to do sales. I love food. I love my mom's products. So that's when I decided that I was going to wanted to go into my mom's business. So I called my mom, and she was thrilled. And then, gosh, all of a sudden my grades went up, and I was doing really well, and I was very focused, and I had a purpose. So then I joined the business. For my sister, Jackie, she did not want to live in Los Angeles, and she ended up traveling around the world for a couple of years, saved up money. And she kept hearing over and over again the same message, no matter where she was. You're crazy not to go into the family business. You have a family business back in Los Angeles? You could work with your mom and your sister. You're crazy not to think about that. And literally, she was so hung up on not living in LA, she didn't even consider the fact that maybe that's what she loved. Then she came into the business.
And so this is really interesting. Listeners, especially if you're not working with produce, you may not know that the wholesale produce, there are a lot of family businesses. So this is not an uncommon thing, although it may be uncommon in other industries. I guess, having 3 generations, how do you guys disconnect since you and one of your daughters and your sister all work at Frieda's?
Well, and we kind of talked about that in the movie a bit, Matt, it was hard in the beginning. And I will say it was hard between my sister and I in the beginning, and that was quite a few years ago. It was hard when my daughter came. So we've kind of set up, through trial and error, a bit of a process. So what happened was with my sister and I, my mom quickly intervened between us and said, look, you can't treat your sister at work. So you have to have a professional relationship. She kind of sat us down and kind of straightened us out. And, thankfully we listened, but we were really upfront about it. So we admitted that, hey, she was my little sister. She was dumb. She was annoying. Why doesn't she know everything already? And my mom reminded me, you got to treat her like a new employee. Don't assume things. Don't assume your relationship. You need to have that professional distance. So fast forward 30 years or so to when my daughter joined the business. And my daughter, Alex, when she joined the business, I made sure she didn't work in a department that I was in charge of. So she worked for another manager. And then, because I didn't think I should be involved in her training and mentoring, I asked my sister to mentor Alex. So here was someone who had a personal interest in the mentoring, yet Alex had someone safe she could go to ask all the silly questions that come up when you're a family member and you just really don't know what to do. And you really don't want to go to mom, who's the boss. So we set up those processes, and we've actually used it with other family members that have done a short stint at Frieda's. We treat them kind of like any other intern or apprentice in our company. We give them a coach, we give them a mentor, we give them assignments, we ask for feedback, and it seems to work pretty well.
Very cool. And okay, so that's really interesting that anyone that joins Frieda's gets a coach and a mentor. So one thing I noticed, because I was at the big produce is the big produce
trade show.
Yeah.
Trade show.
So the big produce trade show is the PMA. And so when I went to visit Frieda's, I visited some of your employees there, and you guys stood out from the rest of the companies there that were on display in the sense that I feel like everyone had a very, very clearly defined role, and they understood the roles of other people and who was on their team and who wasn't. It was more common. The most common thing is okay, you should probably talk to, and this is another example here. You should probably talk to Dave, but he's not here. Why don't you send him a text message? Maybe we'll try to stop by tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. But with Frieda's, talking to your staff there, everyone knew exactly what to do. As soon as I mentioned you need to talk to this person. And I was really impressed by that. So you mentioned that there's mentors. What else do you guys do in terms of, I guess, organizing the company where no one feels lost and everyone has a clearly defined role?
Well, I'm a little bit of a nut. That's kind of me. I'm a little bit of a nut about the way we go to trade shows. And we're really, really clear in the company internally on roles and responsibilities. So one of my first jobs when I started working for my mom was I had to manage the trade show booths. And I like things really organized. And I thought we should kind of get a return on our investment when we go to a trade show. So, I can't tell you all of my secrets, Matt, but we only take our best people to the trade show. We do a lot of rehearsing before the trade show. Everyone clearly knows what their roles and responsibilities are. We have multiple planning meetings before the trade show. We have a recap meeting every day after the trade show. And everyone's very engaged. And that family feel that I told you about earlier that I said happens inside the company, that level of personal accountability and connection that they have in the company, I think you saw that at the trade show kind of being demonstrated, how that level of responsibility and accountability.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And so, Karen, I have one more question for you. A quote from the movie was that, a statistic I should say, was traditional supermarkets are down 15% in sales. Maybe that's not an exact number, but traditional supermarkets are kind of losing market share to farmers markets, drugstores, and it seems like all of the other types of stores are increasing in sales. Where do you see traditional supermarkets in 5 to 10 years? And has Frieda started to prepare or adjust their marketing to target these other alternative types of stores and markets?
I'm laughing. I'm thinking, you're asking me to tell you about all my marketing and sales strategy. So I'll try to answer this. First of all, I think you've really hit on something very important, Matt, and that is the trend of supermarkets being the only place you can go buy food. That day is over. And the fact that here in the USA, you can go to Walgreens and buy your dinner, right? You can get a salad, you can get fresh fruit, you can get cut vegetables, you can get probably fresh juice and coffee. So I think that the supermarket format was the only game in town for decades, and now it's very shifted because everyone sees fresh food, as perishable and profitable. So that's why drugstores are into it. That's why Walmart is into it. That's why Costco does so well. So I think that in farmers markets, and that farmers markets really has to do with the consumer wanting to know where their food comes from, number one. Number two, I think over the years, many farmers, if they were being honest, would say they feel like they get the short end of the stick when they sell to conventional supermarkets. So I remember, so many years ago, we would take $1, and let's say we were talking with educators at the time, and we were talking about the cost of food. And if we bought something at the store for $1, how much did the farmer get back from that dollar? If I, as a consumer, bought like an apple for $1, how much did the apple grower get back? And in fact, it was something like 8 cents at the time. And that's because you have the markup from the retailer, you have the cost of the packaging, you have the wholesaler, you have the trucking company, you have all the other costs. And I think many farmers saw that, they could pick produce that wasn't perfect. They could sell it at that time from their farm stand, and they could get more money with less effort than if they sold and packed and had to do everything involved with packaging to sell to conventional supermarkets. Well, that kind of rolled up into farmers markets now, where farmers can get together in a locale to sell their wares. It's very labor intensive personally. I mean, having worked at farmers market, it's kind of tiring. You're on your feet all day, and it's usually not refrigerated, you're air conditioned. But many farmers can make a decent living that's much less stressful for them. And then consumers get the opportunity to connect to the land and to connect to the story. And, from the very beginning of when my mom started her business, it wasn't exactly about the produce. It was really more about the connection with the farmer. We'd meet a farmer, he or she would come to the produce market, we fell in love with the farmer, and we wanted to help them out by selling their products. And then we'd sell their products, and meanwhile we introduced kiwi to America, and sunchokes, and shallots, and hothouse cucumbers, and alfalfa sprouts, and all these different products. But it was always the story of a farmer. It was always that connection to the farmer. So I think, especially today, any consumer can get any information they want simply by Googling it or whatever search engine they use. And so consumers want immediate access and access everywhere to whatever they want. And I think everyone is struggling with, so what's going to be like 5, 10, 15 years from now? But I think the way I label it is it's schizophrenic. You're going to still have the Walmarts of the world in areas where there's not a lot of options. Let's say you're in the Midwest in the middle of, nowhere. It'll be most convenient to go to a big box store and buy everything, including some of your fresh produce. But if you live in Manhattan, or you live in Santa Monica, or you live in, downtown Houston, you might want to go to a bread store and a cheese store and a produce store and a meat store. Or you might want to go to an organic store. You might want to go to a farmer's market, or you might want to stop and get a snack at the drugstore on your way home. So the schizophrenia is everything's going to be out there. Then you have the option of online. So right now, the big thing in 2015, the right now is what's big is click and collect. So you go online. You order what you want from your grocery store, you click, meaning with your mouse you click, and then you can drive to your store a half hour later and your order's ready for pickup. Saves you the time of walking in the store. Or if you want, you can go online and have it delivered to your home, or delivered menu items like Blue Apron to your home. So there's so many options. And I think that's what's going to be challenging on the business side of it is, so who's going to have critical mass? So I think it's going to be a big challenge.
Wow. So I appreciate you painting that picture and even elaborating a little bit more on online. In terms of Silicon Valley, billions of dollars are being poured into the food delivery space, which is still only 1% of the market. But food delivery, Amazon Fresh and all that stuff is something to watch out for as well. Well, listen, Karen, I know you're a busy woman and I really appreciate having you on the show. I guess my last question is, where can listeners find you online?
Well, they can find us at Friedas.com, which is, you spelled it earlier, F as in Frank, RIE, D as in dog, AS as in Sam.com. It's a very, very robust website. And interestingly enough, Matt, we were the first produce company to put up a website in 1996. And I'll never forget that day when I called my marketing department manager in and said, okay, all that information we have in our library, I want to put it online so everyone can have access to it. And she said, but that means our competition can go online and get our stuff. I said, you know what? I can kind of see the future, and the future is you want to be transparent. It's better to be the source of information than to hide the information. So if you go to our website, we constantly refresh it on a regular basis. So we just went through a redesign recently. But there's product information, there's background on the company, there's tons of recipes. You can look online to see where our products are sold. Our company color is purple, so you'll notice that there's a lot of purple on the homepage. And probably the most fun thing on my website, the company website, and I'm a little prejudiced, is my blog. So I write a blog called What's on Karen's Plate, and it's from the CEO perspective. Years ago, I remember when John Mackey, the co-CEO of Whole Foods, had his own personal blog, and he got a lot of grief for writing his own personal opinion when, in fact, he was the co-chairman of Whole Foods. And at that moment, it was about 7 years ago, I said to myself, I think the CEO of every company should have an individual voice where they can talk from their perspective, not the company line. So I launched my blog in, I think it was 2010. And I don't write about produce very often. I really write about business. I write about life. I write about experiences that I have, lessons that I've learned. Last week, I wrote about Guy Kawasaki, the number 3 employee of Apple Computers that I've heard speak a couple times. Some things I learned from him. A month ago, I wrote about a trip I took to Copenhagen, Denmark, where I had an accidental culinary journey in the top food city in the world with new Nordic cuisine. I ate at the number 1 restaurant in the world, Noma, and I wrote about that, and I take pictures. And then sometimes I write about produce if something catches my fancy. But I think that's the most interesting thing for people to learn about our company is that we just don't push information out about our products. So we're kind of a little different that way.
Great. And another article I saw was on a book that I've always been scared to read because I don't know what it implies for my messy life is The Magical Art of Tidying Up. I read that post.
Well, yes, and I will tell you that book, Matt, changed my life. I got rid of half my clothes. I got rid of half the crap in my house. And at the office, I made everyone clean their workspace here at the office. And it really is very freeing. So I'm glad you read that blog.
Yeah, now I just got to read the book. But
it's not that long a book, Matt. It's really a short book.
Cool. Well, listen, Karen, thanks again for coming on the show, and hopefully we can have you back in the future.
Perfect. Great talking with you, Matt.
Okay.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.